Welcome to another episode of Tales from the Trenches. So today we have Quddus Pourshafie, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Quddus.
Perfect. Thank you.
From FutureLab.Legal to talk about, from a strategic viewpoint, how can small and medium firms compete with larger firms, especially in the middle of the COVID-19 lockdown that's happening at the moment, impacting firms. So Quddus, if you can start by telling us a bit about yourself and what you do with FutureLab.Legal.
Sure. So as you correctly pronounced it, my name is Quddus Pourshafie. I'm an admitted lawyer, but I don't practice. And I've, advised or supported various businesses in a commercial capacity, not always related to legal, but usually around strategy and sense making. So I'm very privileged. I always feel very privileged to be able to pursue something that I'm very passionate about. And that leads me into what FutureLab.Legal is as a business. Essentially, we work alongside other organizations in the industry with a clear focus on the future of law and how we can build or pivot towards that reality. So, first a vision of what that might look like, and then working backwards to see how each potential client can get to the point that they would like that coalesces with a broader vision. The uniqueness of the organization itself is centered around the fact that we cast a holistic view on the industry. So I've separated it into four key stakeholders in the industry at large. We have the legal service providers, which includes alternative. I don't believe that they are alternative, but for the sake of helping people understand. So the market, which is the legal service providers, the institutions, which are the educators, the regulators, which regulate how we are able to practice the law and deliver services, and also how we prepare for it. So it also informs how people are educated. And then legal tech, which is a sort of an emergent sub-niche, but it has its own characteristics. It's nuanced enough for it to be a focal point. And it is a key driver too, I believe. So with that holistic view as a basis, we're essentially able to generate bespoke solutions with each client, because we can work with any side and are across trying to understand and continually pursuing the advancements across four verticals, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we work with firms, we work with legal tech companies, eventually want to work with educational institutions, and have started contributing to projects that touch on the regulatory space or that have implications in regulations. Not necessarily in Australia, but more globally. So yeah, that's exciting.
That's fantastic. That sounds like a very diverse area of strategic topics, Quddus, obviously, and all of it is very relevant in the context of what firms are dealing with currently, around how they evolve and what evolution looks like. So with COVID-19 and the impact it has had on small and medium firms, how do you see the strategy for small and medium firms evolving, Quddus, to compete with large national firms, for example?
That's a good question. I think probably the first thing that's worth covering in that sense is that digital is a more even playing field, essentially. So that's just as a statement in and of itself. It does several things. One is that the brick and mortar is no longer the attraction. So whatever experience you've set up perhaps physically is now everyone has access to the digital capacity. The market size changes. So again, if you were looking at the immediate businesses around your physical building, now it's all of Australia, or other markets all over the world, depending on how you approach your work. And your ability to brand then becomes a lot more flexible. You have a lot more tools at your disposal to make to customize your experience. And there's a uniqueness, and then so there's permission for diversity in a sense, right? And so that's probably the biggest, I think, the biggest pull there. Digital is evening out the playing field And there are some elements there that I've sort of mentioned that are an indicator of that.
Yeah, that's very true, and sort of that gives small and medium firms a lot more options in terms of what their evolution to compete looks like. So, one of the key questions for these firms is also, do they become a larger firm to compete? Obviously, what you are saying, Quddus, is that with digital being the level playing field, how is that question that then impacted? What does growth look like in terms of if you're trying to compete effectively and trying to show to your clients that you don't need to go to a larger firm, we can deal with what you with your issues and provide resolutions?
Yes. I don't believe so. I don't believe growth is related to size necessarily. So it's not that we need it in order to compete. And one way to look at it might be to break down why people go to the big players in the first place. So typically I would say it's across two main key points. One is size, which is representative of capacity in terms of being able to manage large portions of work. And the second is brand. So, what is the image? What is reputation of the particular firm in question? You see a lot of the large corporate clients go to people that it's a safe bet, if that makes sense. More than anything, it's a safe bet. Capacity and size plus reputation, they've done it before. So with the evening of the playing field in digital, the immediate question becomes what can be emulated through technology, which will automatically scale that size that already exists by person to person. And this is not a replacement of talent. So there was always a human element to it and an ability, but more so than anything, it's about how people organize more efficiently, right? And technology can serve to organize more efficiently. We are now stepping into affordable legal analysis through artificial intelligence and machine learning. That has become quite affordable in relation to expenditure on brick and mortar situations. So there's that. There's cost clarity that's related to technology as well. So where we are getting to a point where there's a lot more cost clarity in terms of the tools that we can pay a monthly subscription for in order to carry out the work that we would like to do. And there is outperformance potentially. And that's where the new part's coming. That's the sort of the challenge that I'm putting out there, is that we can outperform larger firms by way of client journey. So how their journey, what their experience is, what value we can actually provide. So in a competing, ever tightening market where there's more competition, of course, a lower price point might be a hook, but often, like I said, they're looking for size for safety. So it might be not actually necessarily that there's a lower price point. It might be the same or comparable price point, but the experience there's more oversight. So the security, sense of safety in numbers could be safety and clarity and oversight of what's happening. Safety in knowing that they have a really well-oiled machine. Safety in knowing that, the work is now being triple checked by technology and enhanced and augmented. Their work is being augmented by technology, which the companies that are buying themselves are also invested in this same process for their own clients. So, we see eye to eye in that sense. So from that, they don't need size because technology will essentially allow for scalability. But it needs to be well organized, if that makes sense.
That makes a tremendous amount of sense. And this next question, you mentioned so much about that sense of safety that the bigger players project, and legal tech obviously then being a key part of small and medium firms to project that same level of, call it safety, call it the comfort that clients get from coming to them.
And value.
And so if a lot of these firms are looking at legal tech Quddus, how do they
Mm.
start the journey? I mean, you are obviously with FutureLab.Legal extensively sort of have several touch points around what we are discussing around this. But what does this look like? Is it bespoke? Is it sort of like what would you recommend to firms if they were looking at this?
There are different ways that firms have approached it. Some out of necessity, some out of lack of alternatives, some out of necessity, some out of inspiration. So there has been a lot of experimenting, a lot of in-house development, a lot of let's take this core software and patch it the way we'd like to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My viewpoint, and as is reflected in a framework that I published last year, is that we don't necessarily need to invest typically how we have in the past with technology. In the sense that it's not a big capital expenditure to buy one piece of software that doesn't quite do everything and then go through the rigmarole of bringing in developers or asking IT with further modifications so it's customizable. We are entering in an era where we have the SaaS model, and many lawyers, many developers are starting to play in the legal tech space. So productivity tools for lawyers, any sort of tools around the law firm and the delivery of legal services. Some of these tools are better executed outside of our industry. So communications, for instance, we have many tools that are very effective in some form. So this SaaS model, step one is people build software. So digitizing something that was perhaps manual before, making it more efficient. The SaaS model also is a volume-based model, so it's always targeted at being more affordable too, right? So we have that. Now it's getting to a phase where people recognize the SaaS model is also about interoperability. It's about an ecosystem. It's about being able to have an API and hook one thing to the next thing. So with that in mind, last year I published a framework called the Future Framework for Legal Practice, which essentially just leverages that reality that's emergent and says we can actually build our core functions by stacking different technologies together in a workflow. As long as we understand what that workflow is. So that's a large part of it. But so in terms of that being the approach, it'll fundamentally change your ability to compete. It'll fundamentally change your cost and the way that you would for spend money, but also how much of it is locked up in expenditures, cash flow. So moving away from capital expenditure, it's a big project, this and that, and looking at change as an iterative process, but then the agility of being able to switch a SaaS product on and switch it off if you don't need it, or swap it from one thing to the next thing. These things are starting to become more of a reality for us. And in fact, it's very possible at the moment. It'll become just easier as we go.
And do you think that firms should try to pursue this sort of model, Quddus, at this stage externally by bringing in external experts, or because obviously that a big challenge for a lot of smaller firms is having the knowledge to create a framework for development and delivery of this type of model, that the appetite might be there, but knowledge is often the barrier to having this, to explore this?
Yes, I think that's a great question. I think it is. Now, there's different ways the industry has approached this. We have heads of innovation, we have vendors trying to sell a very specific product or a small pool of products they're affiliated with. My viewpoint has always been to be platform agnostic. And I wrote about this maybe about a year ago, if not longer, that I believe that it's an educative process at arm's length. So change should come from there should be from outside. It's very, I've spoken to a few heads of innovation internationally that feel they're very much stuck in limbo. They're being paid to look at change, but they're being paid to convince the people that are paying them that what they're doing could be better or different. And oftentimes there's the it's filling a position, but there's no real buy-in, right, from the decision makers. So having someone come from outside, at least even at a first step, to give a different perspective and just open the forum, and then perhaps when they feel comfortable or when they're ready to make those commitments, to facilitate further conversations and press a bit more and find out what direction do we want to take strategically, what's our vision, and then being able to then distill that into, well, how is that possible? Well, yes, it's possible. I think a lot of that, yes, does have to happen from outside, but I also believe, and this is the commitment, I think, of FutureLab.Legal, that it is at arm's length. It's accompaniment. You work alongside the organization over a longer period of time. And there are implications for what does that look like in terms of a business model? What does it look like in terms of cost? Like in terms of how I run my business, so that it is feasible in executing change as an iterative process rather than a product. I think that's one of the issues as well. I think, like you mentioned, getting outside expert help, if it's productized, if it feels like it's, it's just one conversation or one this and that, it's great. It's a door opener, but it's not necessarily going to, until we don't understand change is iterative and it is a process, not a product, that then it'll be quite stagnant. And you did mention, should we be doing this now? My viewpoint from where I stand is we should have been doing this for a long time. And I remember watching one of your earlier episodes and saying, what a great example of I forget the firm's name, but what a great example that they had, that they had thought about this at the time. What they said, 2006, 2008, something very early on, but it might have been 2010.
10, 12, around that time.
10, 12, there you go. Sorry, I'm overshooting there. But I lose track of time myself. But that really caught my eye. I said, that's the type of leadership that recognizes that we start, then it was hard, but we started, and then we realized it never ends, and you keep going and it keeps getting better. And that's why they can reap the rewards now of being relevant or having pivoted to something productive, or continue to generate value for their clients, or continue to operate as a profitable business. And we're in a space now where I didn't believe there was any argument against it before, and I had people arguing against it, and I think even now I think it would be more foolish to argue against the need to change, the need for adaptability.
Absolutely, and a fascinating discussion. Obviously, there's lots to unpack in what we have discussed today. We would love to invite you back to unpack some of the core topics within what we have discussed today around various aspects of what strategy, legal tech, implementation, orientation, knowledge all looks like. I think it's such a vast topic that covering in one podcast is not doing it justice, but I think this is very insightful for a lot of SBA clients. We deal with a lot of small and medium firms for whom knowing the high-level framework as a starting point is the start of the journey. So thank you for your insights today, Quddus. To conclude, is there something that you can share with us that your colleagues at FutureLab.Legal would not be aware of? It's not a strategy question, just something.
No, that's fine. And colleagues or people that I work with alongside through FutureLab.Legal. So I guess not everyone's aware, not everyone's had a chance to be aware that the law and the future of law for me is a relatively new found passion. I was first a musician. So I studied violin since I was 4. And I pursued it all the way to the conservatorium. I was a concert violinist. I played in orchestras and led orchestras in my state in South Australia through that journey.
Fascinating.
I think that whole experience of over 10,000 hours of that instrument and over 20 years of pursuing that art and mastering it was very useful to me moving forward in terms of creativity and how I'm wired to think. It's very lateral. So I've sort of now found a passion in high impact work that serves mankind better, because as we can deliver services better, we deliver justice better for everyone. So it's just this idea of how do we then deal with the difficult elements of our industry as it tries to change. So, but yeah, most people don't know. Most people don't know that I was a musician first for a very, very long time.
Thanks for sharing that. That's absolutely fascinating, and that is, I think, very much evident, as you said, in your thought process and your thinking, which is pretty unique in terms of very different from the traditional law firm process thinking. And being a creative person and being in music, I think you bring that to the table, and that's as important. I think a lot of the time, technology can be very dry, and technology
Yes.
can be very sort of process focused. So it's very important that the richness of the experience is there for practices looking at this and having. I think your background provides that richness of experience in many ways in the discussion.
Technology is the means, right? So
Yeah.
it's not going to be fun if the vision isn't clear. People don't understand what they're building. You can't say the legal tech itself is the exciting part. It's what you build with it. So no, I agree with you completely. I've never thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense too. That I think perhaps why I'm excited about it is not because of the technology per se, but the opportunity the technology provides, and that's the space that I play in and enjoy to think about and deliver on and execute on. So, yeah.
Thank you, Quddus. Thanks for the session today. And we look forward to welcoming you back to another episode of Tales from the Trenches. And thanks for your time.